Hi folks, welcome to Bear Mountain today. Today we are experimenting with our next phase in JADAM and how to apply our fertilizer in a little more organized fashion other than trying to mix it in a bucket and applying the bucket out as a drench. This would also apply to that when we start to work with the JADAM microorganism solution. This system is kind of homemade, but the only component on it that isn't off the shelf that you could get at any hardware store or drip irrigation place is this unit right here. It's called a Mazzei Injector. And what we're doing is we're using the power of, basically it's the Venturi principle. It's creating a siphon. So as the water flows through this unit, its pressure begins to change, and the differential between a high pressure and a low pressure on the back side of it will create a vacuum right at the point where the pressure is reduced. And that is what then pulls material from, say, a bucket that has fertilizer into the stream of water that's flowing through, and it flows through in a measured rate. And it's based on the size of the injector and as well how far open you have the valve here that controls the inflow. So what we did here is kind of a first part of it is we have a safety here that is it's basically a spring backflow preventer. So if there becomes some backflow from the faucet itself, this is the input from the faucet. This will close off as a valve and prevent anything from the fertilizer bucket backing up into your water supply. So that's really important to always have that on there. And then the next thing is, this is high pressure water here. So it's high pressure T coming down. This is just a cutoff valve if I want to turn off the unit. And I have a cutoff valve on the other side for turning it off on that side too. So this flow going through comes through at a higher pressure at about 40 PSI. And it comes out the back end here through this pressure reducer at 20 PSI. So as long as I maintain at least a 25% differential in pressure between the inflow and the outflow, what happens is that vacuum, that suction gets created and the material flows through. So it's kind of a simple design in a sense. It's high pressure coming in to the one end of the Venturi jet. The low pressure on the other side creates a vacuum, and material then is pulled in to the siphon, into the flow, comes out the other end, and that's where it goes either to a drip irrigation, or in this case today what we're doing is we're using just a regular hose nozzle with a nice wand spray on it. So the question is, well, what's the dilution rate? This isn't like really fancy where I can just, dial it in and go beepity boppity beep. It's 1 to 200. You actually have to do a few calculations on it. With the pressure differential that we have, is this material, the siphon is working and diluting at approximately about a 1 to 50 dilution rate. And so what I want to have actually go on the bed itself is a 1 to 200 dilution. So the fertilizer that I put in isn't straight. I have to pre-dilute that in the bucket that it's going to be pulled from. And what I've calculated in order to do that, to get this to 1 to 200, I have to dilute my fertilizer to 1 to 4. So it's kind of, if you can kind of do the math, think about it as 50 is 4 times, 200 is 4 times 50. So that's basically all that has to be done. Then the next thing you got to think about is, okay, well, how fast is this water coming out the back end? Okay, so what we did is we did a kind of a flow test on the outflow with this reduction and how we come in. We're coming off a well, so it's really going to depend on your individual situation. But in our case, what's coming out the back end is roughly 8.5 gallons a minute of flow. So when I took that into account and saying how many, you're such a little nudge today. Off you go now. When I took that into account, saying, I know how many gallons of 1 to 200 diluted fertilizer I need on my ranunculus bed, it's roughly, if I spend 2/3 of a minute or so, 45 seconds or so. Yeah, in say my 8-foot sections, I can basically cover the entire bed. So I'll need approximately about a gallon of fertilizer. We'll do a complete 90 or 80-foot bed, in this case 3 foot wide, and should fertilize it all. And what I've looked at is, okay, so what do I need to dilute this fertilizer at? And I said it's a 1 to 4, so I'm going to mix up 2 gallons of solution. So I'm going to use 1 liter per gallon to get a 1 to 4, because a gallon is approximately 3.8, pretty close to 4 liters. So approximately what I'll put in is approximately 1 liter per gallon to get a 1 to 4 dilution, and that'll get me right in the zone of where I want to be. This is not as exact as somebody, as like a dosatron type fertigation system or something like that, but it's close enough that it'll work out just fine. Now, the input that's coming from the fertilizer bucket also has a stainless steel screen, so that no oversized material can get in to the injector if it was to happen. Also too, as a secondary protection, if it did get jammed up and stopped working, I can take off the injector, because these type of fasteners here basically unscrew, so that I can take the injector out and do any kind of cleaning that I need to do. The only thing is when we're finished applying fertilizer, we're probably going to want to run about 10 minutes or so of just pure water through it, just to get the system completely flushed out. And I think the only other thing that's probably important here, and we already did it, is we filtered the fertilizer, so there is no solids that are, big enough to clog up the emitter. And that's, I think, is an important thing too, is it needs to be filtered before you apply it. And then the other thing is if I was going through the drip irrigation system, I would definitely run it before it hit the drip irrigation system through another like 200 mesh filter. And that would make certain that my emitters and my drip lines weren't clogged. But since I'm using a hose, I don't need to go to that level. So it's really set to go. I just need to put my fertilizer. This is the grass based JADAM liquid fertilizer we made last spring. And I'm gonna put 2 liters in here. I had it pre-measured out, and I've got approximately a little bit more here. I had most of the water in it already, so we're in pretty good shape.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Okay, that's just a temporary thing for having a test on it on those crates. So
right.
It will go into the hoop house as just what?
Okay, in the future, what I'm going to be doing is building like a little mobile unit, because I'll be using this in different places.
So the idea is that it just transports on some kind of thing.
Yeah, because this is the whole thing right here.
Right, and so it's just hooking to hoses in various tunnels.
Hoses, or some kind of like where drip irrigation, you would have like a tie-in to it.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it, and it has to be in that configuration.
Yes.
So like the Venturi part has got to be at the bottom.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to be oriented in this way. It could be oriented like horizontal, but it can't be oriented where this is above it.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, it's got to be below it or horizontal with it, otherwise it won't work right.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm gonna build this on just like an A-frame stand,
right?
Where it can just hang.
So like a picture thing where you pull it out, its legs out,
yeah,
or something
exactly,
like that.
Exactly.
And it just sits there,
right?
And is attached to the irrigation or the hose.
Right. This way, I can move it around to like the various different tunnels or different field locations where I tie into the drip. Okay, the last important point I wanted to put on this is the input flow in I think most cases where you want it to be is you want it to be right nearest to where the highest pressure is. So as an example, where you have if you're hooking this up for a drip irrigation system, you'd want to have it closer to the faucet. You don't want to have a pressure reducer like you have for your drip irrigation system in between the start of this and your actual drip line. So you want the higher pressure in so that you can get a bigger differential coming out. So so as an example, if you started with a drip irrigation system that had a 20 psi coming in, you're not really going to get any kind of differential, because this is a 20 psi going out. So 20 in, 20 out, no differential. You're not going to get any kind of vacuum, so the stuff won't move. So the higher pressure you can be on this side, to your water supply, that's the key to making it work. If you start from low pressure, you're not going to get enough of a differential to pull material. So that's important. The other thing, and Denise had a question on this, saying, well, would it make more sense to have multiple of these on the property instead of moving them around?
I was also asking, what's the general cost of that thing that you just made?
Right. We got the injector. It actually was made by Mazzei, and it was sold by a third party that was licensed by them. And we got it from Amazon, and it was approximately $30. And even if you bought it from Mazzei, it's kind of the same price. So it didn't really make any difference of how I got it. And then the rest of the configuration, all the parts are bought new. By the time you put everything together, is about $75–80, right around in there.
And looking for, efficiency, having more than one.
Yeah, if you're looking at it and saying, hey, I'm doing this all the time, I don't want to move this thing around, you'd maybe plumb it into, your system on a more permanent basis. But in the winter time, though, you would definitely want to pull this unit out if you were in a cold climate, because you don't want it to freeze.
Right.
Yeah, maybe
probably not one for every tunnel we have, but maybe one down here and one up above where we also garden and grow flowers.
Yeah, I think, eventually we'll probably have more than one of them. But I guess what I'm trying to do is kind of like, well, I want to,
how it works.
I want to get a good feel for, how to do the right dilutions and how to set it up and make it work. So
see if it makes a difference.
Well, it'll definitely make a difference on application.
Okay.
The next step after this one is to run it through a drip system and see what kind of effects I have on the drip system. Do I end up plugging stuff up, or does it work? And
so
then
we're not running it through the drip today.
Not today. Today we're going to run it through our regular hose, and we're going to apply it to the ranunculus bed that we have here in the tunnel. And our weather's been so mellow that I think, a slight fertilizer application probably won't hurt these plants at all. Matter of fact, it might help them a little bit. And
do we typically fertilize this?
Usually I'm like running, like right now, I'm probably like a week after my last time I do any kind of application of anything. So, but I'm not that far off. And like I said, we've been warmer than normal, so it's probably not going to be a bad thing. And the last application of fertilizer I did in here, because I knew I was going to get to this point, was almost, this will be 4 weeks.
So if you were going to do it, it's time.
Yep. Okay, so one of the things to watch here is, you're going to see a darkening color in the input line as I turn this thing on and run it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run that, and you can see the material already looks darker than regular clear water, which means it's pulling it in. I got to make sure my filter stays under the solution. Well, there's a first one too I got to work on. There we go.
How to keep it down.
Yeah, probably gonna have to put some kind of weight on it or something, because it tends to want to curl up. Oh, it keeps coming back up. Weird. All right, let me just do this. I'm going to put
bury more of the tube.
More tubing in it, see if it'll keep it down. Okay, I just want to make certain that I don't have any air in the lines. There's a little air there, just went through. All right, we're good. All right, I got 2 gallons of fertilizer, so I'm really set to go, and let's get it done. Check the bucket to see if that water line's moving around. Well, we had a few issues.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, testing is always an interesting thing, you know, when you're first trying something out and you don't know exactly, you know the theory, but the practical application always takes a little work. And it's another reason I didn't want to permanently install this thing until I've had enough operating time with understanding some of the nuances. And the number one nuance is if you don't have your outflow wide open, it will not pull material through. So you cannot restrict the flow coming out the back end.
But your test was using a wand.
Right, and I was using a wand, and what I was doing is I was kind of like, you know, measuring it back, so I was trying to be like real careful around the plants instead of just like, okay, fine, overhead, you know.
It didn't work.
So yeah, when I tried to do that, it stopped pulling fertilizer, but at first I thought, oh my gosh, I plugged it up.
So we tore it apart.
So I tore it all apart and went, there's nothing wrong with it.
And then there was something wrong with the hose. Yeah,
and the hose got all kinked up. But once we figured out that what it was is, yeah, if you're going to use a wand or anything, it's got to be wide open. So it's got to be able to flow, which is going to make me wonder a little bit about, like there's going to have to be a minimum number of emitters that when I start trying to do this with drip, like how many beds at a time I got to water in order to get the right flow of it working right. So there's going to be a lot more experiments going on here to get this. And this was just the first test we did with the JLF, which I think has probably, if it has a potential to jam up anything, this is the material that probably has more suspended solids in it than anything else. And most of these are really fine, and I didn't filter the fertilizer, the JLF, through anything more than like a paint strainer bag. So it still worked. It didn't jam up.
Do we need to find something with a finer mesh than that?
I think we're going to have to for the drip lines. I'm worried about the drip emitters getting plugged.
What would be finer than that?
Well, you run it through like one of the drip irrigation systems have filters for them. So if we can like run it through that, like a 200 mesh, that'd probably make certain that nothing got in there and jammed things up. So the next test I want to do with the same overhead type situation is with the actual JMS microbe solution and see how that works. I think I figured it out for the fertilizer. So we can do that. Then lots of times what you can do in JADAM is you can mix in the same bucket if you're applying this stuff, your JMS plus your JLF, and have it like flow through the system at once. As long as it doesn't, sit there for very long, but is actually just mixed and then put into the system, and that's probably ultimately where we're going to end up being. Overall though, I think it worked. I got one more side of ranunculus to do, so I got about another gallon of fertilizer left. I didn't see, once we figured it out, it worked out pretty fast.
Yeah, I did. I could even feeling it pulsing through the I don't know what to call it, contraption.
Yeah, you can feel a flow through.
Yeah, I could just feel it pulsing through.
I think, it's also going to be important if you're watering overhead to have good ventilation. So like we got this tunnel totally kind of really good airflow in here today. We got a nice breeze outside, so it's going to be off the foliage pretty quick before we have to shut things down.
So I think the biggest takeaway, it works, but don't install it permanently until you're sure it works.
I think, in anything like this, you really gotta run it yourself for a while to know, what the parameters of it is. And I have a flow measuring valve here on it, but I've got it wide open, so it's at 1 to 50. So I don't know what effect that'll have on, fooling around with dilutions. Turning it down to maybe a quarter or a half or 3/4 or something, and just kind of see, what effect that has on flow. It took once we figured it out, it took only like a couple minutes to water the row.
Yeah, it was fast.
Yeah, it's pretty fast.
It was like, tear this part, tear that apart, check this, check that.
Yeah.
So, and you did a test, you said, with water that had a slight dye to it.
Yeah, I put a bunch of food color dye, like blue dye, in the water.
Just to watch it
kind of make it look like tidy bowl water, and just to watch it flow through, so I knew it was actually moving through the system. And it worked fine. And even this, like, you know, again, you know, a 1 liter to 1 gallon dilution didn't seem to have, you know, enough solids in it to be a problem to block the actual equipment itself. It's just the, you know, you got to make sure you have the flow. So yeah, I guess that's it.
Yep.
So next test,
run.
we got more testing to do. So
Always.
okay, folks. Well, anyway, just thought we'd show you that, you know, what we're trying to build towards next year's irrigation system. And we still got more work to do. So we'll probably do more updates on this as we figure more things out. So thanks for watching today. And as always, stay safe out there. We'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you later.